it.
Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
With the second pick in the 2011 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos select Von Miller, linebacker, Texas A&M.
He's the greatest ever, huh?
And then I just wanted
When you got all the advantages.
Welcome to the Aggie War Pod, a product of the Republic of Football Podcast Network and Dave Campbell's Texas Football. I am your co-host, Mike Craven, senior writer at DCTF. The other voice you'll hear on this podcast is a barbecue-eating machine who won't shy away from a road trip or an off-key rendition of Creed. The former fighting Texas Aggie defensive lineman arrived in College Station as a three-star prospect back in 2013. He now resides in Houston, Texas, but his heart never left. Ladies, gentlemen, reverently, I present the one, the only, Jay Arnold.
Yeah, and I'm still kind of reeling from this weekend. Obviously not the result we wanted. If you're an A&M fan, kind of close to what I predicted though, as far as the score. I wasn't far off. 27-20 was my prediction. Alabama wins 26-20. But man, it felt like that one was kind of in the palm of A&M's hand, and it just felt like a giveaway almost. A lot to talk about, though.
I'm not sure the best team won. We'll break that down in first down. For listeners who are new, we break this down into 4 downs, kind of like a football series. We'll talk about the Alabama loss in first down. Talk about some big picture topics coming out of that loss in second down. And third down, we'll preview the Tennessee game this Saturday. Yes, the football season continues even after the loss against Alabama. And then in fourth down, we'll have some fun with Ask Jay, where we kind of talk about some off-topic stuff outside the football field. Before we get started, if you're listening, please subscribe, rate us 5 stars, tell a friend, put it on social media, all the stuff that you can do to help grow the podcast. If you'd like to be a advertiser, please hit up Jay or I, on Twitter or in email, whatever you want to do to talk to us there. Go to Home Field Apparel. If you haven't, go to Home Field Apparel, get some apparel for that next Aggie home game. They have some really cool stuff for Texas A&M. If you use the promo code WHOOP, WHOOP, you get 15% off of your first order, and we get a little bit of kickback on that one. So we like those things. Go ahead and do that. It's a great company, and appreciate y'all's support. On this week's show, as I mentioned, we will talk about the Texas A&M 26-20 loss to Alabama, and then preview the Week 7 contest at Tennessee. Jay, let's jump into this 26-0 loss to Alabama. The game was right there. A&M was winning at halftime. They had multiple chances in the second half. I think the topic of conversation we might as well just get into early is, what do you attribute that loss to? Is that on the field football where Alabama just beat Texas A&M, or do you lean more towards what I've seen online the last couple of days, and that's the kind of coaching staff maybe letting down this group?
Look, we've talked about how coming out of the half, A&M has been a little bit sluggish and perhaps behind on adjustments. That was the case again on Saturday, and it cost A&M the game. A&M comes out at the half, and Alabama scores 14 in the third quarter to take the lead. They get a safety there in the fourth quarter, and it just seems like there weren't adjustments. It seemed like A&M kept trying to force long developing pass plays or runs inside the tackle box that just weren't there. Or, A&M struggled on the offensive line to protect Max Johnson, which again is why I think you get to some quicker pass plays to try to get the ball out of his hands fast if you're not able to protect him. And it just seemed like those adjustments didn't happen. Defensively, I mean, obviously, we knew what the issue was going to be going into this game. We knew that Milroe had the capability to hit the long ball, and they hit the long ball repeatedly. I mean, that's pretty much the only thing that was open for Alabama was that long ball, but the adjustment to that was never made either. In the front seven, I thought the team played just as well as they have in the past two. They gave this Aggie offense a chance to win. I mean, you look at it, and 23 yards rushing for Alabama. You hold an Alabama team to a quarter of a football field in rushing, and you can't get the win. I mean, it's frustrating. And Like you said, I don't know that the best team won this game. There were several opportunities A&M had, and a lot of time it looked like they were the better team, but just a couple matchups here and there. And, Alabama, you can't have any errors against Alabama, and A&M had repeated errors, and the Crimson Tide came out on top. It's kind of a disappointing result, especially I don't know if you could feel it from the press box, but that crowd was electric on Saturday, being in the stands. I mean, several false start penalties caused, in my opinion, by the crowd. Just a great opportunity to kind of cement your place atop the SEC West, and they just didn't capitalize.
Yeah, to your point, 5 first half false start penalties. There was a point in the second half on a drive where they had 3 in a row that kind of pushed them back and forced them to punt. 108,101 people at Kyle Field. That was the third largest attended game ever there. I'd say we spent the last 5 minutes on the field from the press box, just kind of watching the last little bit. I'd say top 5 atmosphere I've ever been a part of. If you take away like national championship games and kind of, some of those bowl games at the Rose Bowl that kind of get interesting for their own reasons, but just a great crowd. Definitely impacted the game and put A&M in a position to win it. I want to go through some of these coaching decisions just to get you. I mean, you know more about football than I ever will. So just to get some thoughts on what your thought process was on here. They punted 3 times in Alabama territory. I think the most egregious one was the 4th and 1. I think it was on Alabama's 47 or 48 late in the third quarter at 17-17. Alabama, I hate using what happens next when we're looking at decisions, because that shouldn't always play into it.
Hindsight's 2020 and
right. But it's 17-17. You're in Alabama territory. You punt that ball. Alabama goes and scores the game-winning touchdown. So it makes it look really bad. In hindsight, did you think the decision was bad in the moment? Would you have gone for it?
Yeah, I mean, I get why, because I've gone back and watched film. I'm a sicko like that. I like to torment myself and watch this game multiple times. And early in the game, on the first drive for A&M, you have that attempt at getting a 4th and 1, and it fails. And I have to wonder if that wasn't in the coach's mind. Plus, you look at how the defense has been. The defense has been the key component to this team's success. So you trust your defense, and I get why they don't. But at the same time, I think, in that situation where your offense is struggling anyway, I think you have to go for it. I think, it's a opportunity to really put pressure back on Alabama, as opposed to putting it on your own defense. And, in that scenario, personally, I would have gone for it. I get both sides of the argument, but I just think that playing a little bit more conservatively ended up costing A&M there, as far as going for it on 4th down.
You've been on sidelines before for big decisions, obviously. Does what the coach does in those situations, does that bleed into the team? Like in the moment, do you go like, oh man, he doesn't trust our offense, this is going to be all on us to do this thing? Or there's so many things going on that maybe you don't feel it in the same way that the fans do? How does the sideline react to moments like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know from an offensive standpoint, just because that's not my realm. Defensively, you're always just kind of focused on, all right, let's get out there and go execute what we need to do. But I think there is an element of that. If you're an offensive player, just kind of being a competitive guy, you want to go out there and win the game. You want the game on your shoulders. There's not a guy out there on the team that's going to want to punt in that situation. And I do think that, having that decision kind of taken away from you, it does, it does create a little bit of frustration. Again, like defensively, you want to go out there and do your job, so you're not super worried about it. But I just circle back to the aggressive mentality that I think you had to have going into this game that I just kind of felt like was absent in the second half.
And then the next big play or the next big decision for Fisher that people are second guessing was, it gets down to 4th and 2 on the goal line there, about 2 or 3 yards, away from the end zone. You're down by 7. Or I think maybe 9. I can't. I think it's 9 at that point.
9 at that
right?
point,
because of the safety. Do you go for a field goal like Fisher did, or do you go to the end zone because you're that close to it?
I don't mind the field goal in that scenario, because you're going to have to get those points anyway. I don't think like there's certain scenarios where if you're down 14 and you kick a field goal, it's waving the white flag. In this case scenario where you're needing 9 points, a field goal helps you, right? Like it makes it where you win the game with a touchdown or an extra point if you can get the ball back. And again, defensively, you would think that this team was going to be able to get the ball back. So I don't really blame the decision making there, especially with Alabama probably going into a little bit more conservative play calling. Like, and let's be honest here, A&M very close to getting the ball back after that field goal. But again, I get why people are frustrated. That one in particular doesn't bother me that much.
That one doesn't bother me as much if you don't call a timeout before the field goal.
Yeah, and that's where the issue comes in, is it's the clock management. Obviously not as bad as some examples that we saw on Saturday.
Shout out to Miami for saving Jimbo Fisher from being the clown show of the weekend, really.
Yeah, thanks to a previous opponent, right? But no, I mean, the clock management has always been an issue here, and I get that you want to have time to make a decision. But I think you have to have that field goal team ready to go. And maybe part of the second guess is that you have a field goal blocked already. And that's why they kind of wanted to discuss it a little bit more. But I just don't think you can afford to use a timeout in that scenario.
Because even if it takes you 20 seconds to get your field goal kicker on the field and kick it, that's still 15 seconds less than what the other team can run it off when you don't have the timeout. I'm with you. I didn't think the field goal was that egregious of a decision. You need a field goal and you need a touchdown. It's fourth down there. If you don't make the field goal, the game's over regardless, right? So you need some points there to keep the play going, to keep the string going. My only thing is, at least on paper, you're on the 2-yard line. You're not going to get closer to the end zone when you get the ball back finally, right? Like, I would rather have a Hail Mary 55-yard field goal to win this football game than a Hail Mary 55-yard, throw it up in the air and see somebody try to catch it in the end zone type deal at the end. So to me, once you complete that pass on third down, you get into fourth and goal there on the 2 or 3 yard line. And then especially once you take the timeout, that's as good of a chance as you're going to get to score a touchdown in that scenario. So I know it basically ends the game if you don't get it, and so you kick the field goal to extend it. But in my mind, that's just extending the inevitable, because you're putting yourself in a position to where you're going to have to Hail Mary, which leads me to my next question about the game management stuff. The onside kick. Do you need to stop them no matter what, right? Like, if they get a first down, the game is over. So why put the ball on the 50-yard line rather than kick it deep and try to have it on the 25, to where now you got to go, because you're going to need the touchdown, right? And so you put them on the 40-yard line after the onside kick, and they can just pin you deep, and now you got to go 90-something yards in a minute and a half, even if everything works out the way that it does. Alabama, Jalen Milroe made a really good play there on third down to ice the game. But once you've called that timeout, now you only have 2 timeouts. It just feels like you got to kick it deep. His explanation afterwards was, well, if we had 3 timeouts, we would have kicked it deep because we knew for a fact we could have got the ball back if we stopped them. But you knew you were going to get the ball back if you stopped them on 3 downs anyway. You just weren't going to have as much time, which makes that yards even more important in my mind. I guess I just didn't get I didn't get that whole scenario. I didn't get the calling the timeout and then kicking the field goal and then onside kick. It just felt like it was all just made up in the moment. And looking back on it, I know it's easier. Like we just mentioned, hindsight's 2020. Everything's happened down there really fast. But you're getting paid $10 million a year for this type of stuff. These are the decisions that you make all that money to do. It felt very conservative and felt scared. It felt like a coach playing not to win or not to lose. And you can't do that against Nick Saban. Like they are going to come up with every single opportunity and cash that stuff in. You have to take advantage of it. And it felt like from the very beginning, Jimbo Fisher and the Aggies came in there being way too conservative to win that football game.
Yeah. And it's circling back to the decision to kick the field goal off timeout. Like I get why they would want to kick that field goal too, because you haven't had success in the short yardage situations. So maybe in your head, you're thinking, all right, the field shrunk. Maybe we feel a little bit more comfortable with a little bit of distance, but in that case scenario, you still kick it deep. Like you don't kick the onside kick and then make your defense come up with a stop. I mean, the flip side of it too is, I mean, if you believe in your defense and you say that you believe in your defense, why even kick the onside kick? Like if you think you're going to get the ball back, I just man, there's a lot to be frustrated with. And I know part of that too is, being a fan and having all of the hindsight that we've talked about. And,
Sure.
in the moment, you don't know exactly what's going to happen. Because if A&M recovers that onside kick, I mean, you have 2 timeouts to go 50 yards. And it's a dream scenario, really. But I just, with how your defense is played, knowing that Alabama is probably going to be running the ball and looking at what Alabama has been able to do running the ball, I just don't understand not kicking that ball deep.
It just felt like at the end, A&M was counting on low percentage plays having to happen.
Yeah.
Needing to get a touchdown after you make the field goal, needing to get an onside kick back. If you don't get that back, now you got to go 85 yards instead of 55 yards or 60 yards for a touchdown at the end. It was a poorly managed game. I don't think that there's any way around that. It felt like a poorly managed game, especially in hindsight, against a team and a coach that you cannot lose the sidelines to that much, right? Like A&M's not that much better than Alabama to where they can get clowned on the side. Like Nick say, like you have to coach to almost a draw, which is, I know, hard because you're talking about the greatest of all time on the other sideline. But it felt like if you flipped the coaching staffs, if you put Alabama and Nick Saban on A&M's team, or if you just flipped rosters, like give A&M or give Alabama and Nick Saban everything that A&M has and vice versa, right? A&M the Nick Saban coach team wins that by 10 if they have Jimbo Fisher's roster and vice versa, right? Like It feels like you can usually look at offense, you can usually look at defense, or you can usually look at special teams and isolate a few things that cost a team the game. It felt like this one, the biggest coster of the football game, happened on the sidelines, happened with the coaching staff.
Yeah, and look, the other thing that kind of upsets me as a former player here is you see a lot of talk about like officials and officiating in deciding games. If you make the correct calls and you make adjustments at halftime, you see that Bama is going to try to hit the deep ball. You make those adjustments. The officials don't come into it. And I understand like getting a little frustrated on that one Evan Stewart ball where the umpire is, kind of an obstacle. Honestly, he could still make that catch, but you can't pin it down on officials when you have so many opportunities to win the game on your own merit. And I think that's a problem with fan bases in general, is blaming things on the officials when that's not really the case. And like you said, I mean, another thing that was super kind of frustrating about this, normally Jimbo calls his best games against Alabama. Like we've seen lesser talented A&M squads be competitive against the Tide just because it seems like Jimbo usually brings out the best. And if he calls one of his better games, A&M wins, in my opinion. But that just isn't what happened on Saturday. And there's, some other scenarios, obviously, where you're not capitalizing. If that field goal doesn't get blocked, it's 23-26. You have to wonder, well, then A&M probably goes for the touchdown there at the end of the game instead of, I mean, there's just a lot of variables here.
Even kicking that field goal that got blocked was a silly decision, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Just like it felt like, so in 2021, when A&M upset Bama at home, they had nothing to lose. They were coming off of 2 losses. They could just throw everything against the wind and try to have the upset. It's us against the world. Nobody believes in us, all that kind of stuff. Last year, it felt like A&M had not much to lose. The season was already kind of going in towards the tank a little bit. Let's try to right all these wrongs, get a win at Alabama. Maybe that jump starts the season, and they go in there with nothing to lose. There was a lot to lose on Saturday. Texas A&M, with that win, is in control of the SEC West. It looks like a down year. Everything's in front of Texas A&M if they go win that football game. And it felt like Jimbo Fisher coached it knowing how much was riding on that football game. He did not play as reckless and as wild and as free as maybe he had coached the previous 2. It felt like the pressure of the moment and the situation and knowing that Nick Saban was across from him kind of got to him a little bit in a way that it hasn't in the last couple of years, because he hasn't had to facing Nick Saban with the expectations at the same time.
Yeah. And I mean, there was a lot of national people or national media picking A&M to win this game. Yeah, I felt like kind of that odd man out, not picking A&M. And I'm honestly in hindsight, I'm just it's frustrating because like the game played out how I expected with like a
Right.
few
Me
twists and
too.
turns,
Me too.
but it's just all the more disappointing. Uh, I mean, we've kind of talked about it ad nauseum, but it's just so many decisions that I felt like was decisions were made that felt ultra conservative, and I mean, it's just you have a chance. You play with the same aggression that you normally play with, and you have a real shot to uh, cement yourself atop the SEC West. But just so many opportunities that weren't capitalized on. I mean, you have the interception that ends with A&M throwing another interception, giving the ball right back. I mean, you capitalize on that, and you're going in. And there was a few balls that were underthrown. Anaya Smith had a real good shot at a long touchdown, but the ball's underthrown. He could still make that catch. I mean, and I don't want to single out any of the guys either, right? Like it's there's thousands of factors that go into it. And at the end of the day, it just comes down to not executing. And when you don't execute against an Alabama team, you lose games. So we'll see how A&M bounces back. Obviously, things don't get easier. You're going on the road to one of the most hostile environments in the country to take on a ranked Tennessee squad. So you got to have the goldfish mentality, right? Short memory. We'll see. We'll see if A&M responds.
Yeah, I mean, on the football field, I thought the biggest play of the game was the Johnson interception 2 plays after the Bryson Anderson interception, the one you alluded to. A&M's up 17-10. Alabama gets the ball to start the second half. They throw an interception. That Kyle Field is going nuts at that moment, right? Like you're up by 7 points. You just got the ball back. Even if you go just make a field goal and make it a 10-point game, it felt the way that Alabama is built. All of a sudden, A&M can pin their ears back, go after the passer, and they're not going to be able to figure that out. Instead, 2 plays later, Max Johnson throws an interception. Caleb Downs, that true freshman safety for Alabama, is unreal, by the way. That kid is freakishly good. Comes up with a really big play, makes that interception. A couple plays later, Alabama.
Which was a hell of a play, to be fair.
It was. It was an absolute hell.
You can't be super mad at that.
That guy's a future first-round draft pick, All-American player. Like that is one of the best true freshmen to come through Alabama in a while. And also, this Alabama defense is legit. As much as we want to talk about that offense maybe not being what it's been with like Lane Kiffin as the OC and Sark as the OC, that defense is really, really good. One of the better ones in the last couple of years. And Texas A&M only scored 3 points in the second half total. But I thought that drive was crucial. I know it was early in the third quarter, a lot of football left to play, all those decisions that we talked about. A&M still could have won this game even with that interception. But it feels like if they capitalize on that one and go and score, even a field goal to make it a 2-possession game, all of a sudden, all the momentum, all the belief, everything is on A&M's side. Instead, they just let it slip through their hands. So it's not just decisions, right? It's not just the coaching staff. The players miss some opportunities as well, as you pointed out.
Yeah, and I mean, if you go down and score and capitalize on that, not only does it give you a chance of defense to pin their ears and get back, but Kyle Field, I mean, there's kind of a collective sigh whenever that interception was thrown. If you go down and score, all of a sudden you're up by 10. That crowd is going to be even more intense than what we saw, which, I mean, again, I still think the crowd played a big factor, but if you go and make that play and capitalize, and like you said, even just a field goal at that stage, it feels like you're really in control and can get after Alabama on the defensive front, which again, I do want to give the defensive front their flowers because that was a hell of a performance. I mean, Edgerrin Cooper is what a year he's having. Fadil Diggs with a great performance. Walter Nolan obviously was a factor. It's just, man, it's always more frustrating when there's a chance to win and you let it slip away.
I think that's the most painful part. Losing to Alabama happens. People lose to Alabama all the time. Like that's what Alabama does is they beat teams when they're not supposed to. But lose like with the amount that was riding on it, and with the way Alabama played and the way, frankly, A&M played really well that first half and put themselves in a chance to go win that football game. To let it slip through your fingers feels like a big one. The secondary continued to struggle. The offensive line continued to struggle. obviously the Jimbo Fisher decisions. And so kind of back to the drawing board after that one, a tough loss. I think we both agree that A&M was as good, if not better, on Saturday than Alabama. It's just small margins, coaching, execution, little things like that is what separates, on these big games. And so, doesn't get any easier, as you mentioned. So A&M's got to figure out a way to dust us fans and media people. Like, we can kind of dwell on this stuff, but the Aggies have to get back to it because, as you mentioned, not getting any easier going on the road to playing a Tennessee team that's pretty good offensively as well. So we'll talk about that one a little bit more in third down. Let's get to second down here, where we talk a little bit more kind of big picture stuff coming out of that loss to Alabama. I want to talk about the offensive line first. What are your kind of overall takes? Is this coaching? Is it scheme? Like, how is Bryce Foster? Because you got to explain this to me as a layman. Bryce Foster, guys like Reuben Fathery, like, how did those guys not get any better in year 3 than they were in year 1?
Well, and like Reuben Fathery hasn't even been playing.
Right.
But no, I think part of it's injury. I think that does play a big role, but also just seems like the scheme doesn't necessarily line up with what A&M does best. And then in the passing attack, it just, for one thing, I do want to give Alabama a lot of credit there. Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell are both very, very talented pass rushers.
Yeah.
But I mean, across the whole offensive line there in the second half, Alabama's pretty much collapsing the offensive line. And that's part of why Max Johnson's unable to get rid of the ball. I don't know how they aren't better at this stage. I do think they tend to perform better in the run game when they get into more of a man blocking set or a man blocking scheme as opposed to a zone blocking scheme. I think that hurts a little bit. Even then, though, like Tim Smith on the interior for Alabama is another fantastic player. The front seven is going to be a battle, but it's just pressure. I mean, A&M has to be better at pass blocking, and I don't know if that's just a change in scheme and maybe Henson's approach to pass blocking was better than what Adazio has shown so far. But A&M just doesn't seem to have improved there. Maybe it is the players. Maybe they had already peaked when they started early. Regardless how you slice it, I mean, it's just, you have to be better than that. Again, we circle back to 3 straight years with the starting quarterback being lost to injury. And I think that falls on the offensive line.
Yeah, just the development doesn't seem to be there. Week-to-week adjustments don't seem to be there. Like, there's just no way to hide some of these issues. Whenever you get into a situation where you have to play a true freshman on the edge against, teams that are this good, you're going to have some problems, right? So I'm not going to blame the true freshman for not being ready for these big games. I'm going to blame the coaching staff for not recruiting guys and developing in a way that where a true freshman has to start for you at tackle in big games like this. And so at A&M, with the way that they recruit and the way that the offensive line talent is in this state, I say this about the Longhorns all the time. They're starting to figure this out a little bit, but it's been true for a decade plus. You can't be this bad on the offensive line. Like, there's no excuse for it. Like, you should be able to find big guys, develop big guys, and at least put out an adequate to an above average offensive line, essentially year in and year out, if you're at A&M or if you're at Texas.
Well, and especially with the history that A&M has on the offensive line. I mean, you go back to when I was there, guys like, Luke Jokel had just left, Jake Matthews, Cedric Abuehi, Jermaine Ifedi, and then Eric McCoy coming in later. Like, there's a rich history of offensive line and A&M producing at that position in particular, especially recently. But then all of a sudden, the past 3 years, it just feels like there's been a fall off. And I don't know if that's, an indictment on Jimbo Fisher or the offensive line coaches that have been there. But it's just, you need to win in the trenches to win games, and A&M's not doing that on the offensive side of the ball.
Layden Robinson entered 2022 as kind of like a dark horse, going to be an NFL draft kind of guy. He feels like he's flattened out. His PFF grades haven't been very well. I've been surprised that Cam Dewberry hasn't played more, just because of his stock as a recruiting guy and like how good he was coming out of high school. And so, yeah, it just feels like they've lost a couple guys for the transfer portal, obviously, that have hurt depth there. It just feels like a position that shouldn't be as bad as it is. I think we can safely say that. It should be better. And it's the thing holding back the offense. Like, as you mentioned, the quarterback injuries can at least somewhat be attributed to that offensive line. And when you have a backup in there and you're not able to have any type of balance, like I didn't expect A&M to go into Alabama and rush for 200 yards. Like I don't think anybody expected that. But you got to be able to run the ball sometimes, and you got to be able to protect. And they weren't able to do either of those things really on a consistent basis. And that, I mean, what are you going to do if you're Max Johnson at that point, right? I mean, you're just playing for your life, and he's not an NFL first or second round pick guy anyway. That's going to like make up for that stuff. And so it just felt like as the game went on, Alabama figured out more and more like, hey, they can't block us. Like they can't block us at all. And so once Alabama decided that and knew that, it felt like A&M had no chance. In the second half, it felt like A&M was lucky to move the ball, much less try to score.
Yeah. And I mean, a big part of that is, you do still have a lot of talent there on the edges. Anaya Smith in particular, I thought had a pretty solid game. Big punt return that helped out A&M a lot. And he just made plays. Really wish he would have got that touchdown. Obviously, I'm not blaming him. That's a hell of a play, regardless. But now again, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with if A&M capitalizes on that interception, and they get to pin their ears back. It felt like Alabama did that.
Yeah. Right.
All of a sudden, Alabama can pin their ears back and really get after the quarterback, as opposed to kind of having to play smart. And it just kind of made the game easier for Alabama. So, yeah, again, this is where I think you have to get a little bit of a better short passing game, slants, crossing routes, like very quick catch and release things so that Max Johnson isn't getting hit in the face on nearly every play.
Yeah, I mean, Evan Stewart's clearly not 100%. Obviously, missing Noah Thomas and that ability to get downfield. And so, it was a tough game for the A&M outfit. But I don't think any of us thought, I mean, my prediction was 28-24 A&M. So we thought it was going to be this kind of scoring game. It wasn't going to be A&M getting into the 30s or even into the 40s. It was going to be played in the teens and in the 20s. The defense, at least in the front seven, played well enough to keep A&M in that game. And the offense, in the first half, moved the football, scored enough points, just the 3 points in the second half. You're not going to win many football games against teams as good as Alabama if you're only scoring 3 points in the second half, because the defense can only hold up for so long. Like the defense is going to give up some points. Like that's still a talented offense on the other side. I wrote down when I was in the press box kind of my 3 keys to the game afterwards, and it was coaching decisions, offensive line play, and then secondary. Let's talk a little bit about the secondary. Jermaine Burton had nearly 200 yards. He scored both of the touchdowns in the third quarter to put Alabama up on top. Jalen Milroe, who's not an incredible passer, ended with over 300 yards passing, had 3 touchdowns, looked really good, looked really comfortable, especially in the deep game. Jay, kind of what's your just overall view on this Aggie secondary? Is it schematic? Is it players? Kind of where do you see the issues?
Well, so
both.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it seemed like from the jump, Alabama's strategy was to pick on Josh Berry, and that was what they did successfully throughout the game. But I mean, even when Tyreek Chappelle or Deuce Harmon was in coverage, there were still some struggles there as well. And then you also have just like straight up blown coverages, like the Isaiah Bond touchdown, where he is completely behind the secondary with no one close to him. You just can't have that. And it seems like they're covering the underneath routes better than they were against Miami. And maybe that's part of the issue, right? Is you focus more on that and rallying to those, and as opposed to covering deep. But going into this one, I mean, we talked about it ad nauseum that Milroe struggles in the intermediate game, and the key to stopping him as a passer is going to be the long ball, because he does have the arm strength to throw that long ball and has hit those types of plays in the past. So I don't understand how you're not more prepared for that. I have to attribute some of that to coaching, because everyone knows what the strategy is going to be. And it's the same thing. Like A&M did have to get aggressive up front. Like you have to bring pressure, so you're going to give up some big plays. But by the same token, it's when you know exactly what the other team is going to do and you can't stop it. It's got to be a mixture of both coaching and personnel out there. I do think A&M is going to improve in the secondary, but it just seems a shame to waste a defensive line and linebacking core that is performing so well right now.
My heart goes out to those defensive linemen and linebackers. I don't know how y'all don't kill each other, right? Like, I don't know how on a team when it's that lopsided, we see it a lot of times with like one unit versus the other unit. Like the offense is really great and the defense can't stop anybody, or the defense is really great and the offense is awful, like in Iowa. I don't know how a linebacker at Iowa didn't just choke slam the quarterback or a wide receiver, or even the offensive coordinator. I don't know how Walter Nolan doesn't walk back to the secondary and go like, what the, like how do you kind of handle those discrepancies within a, not only unit to unit, but like within a unit? Like, it feels like the front seven of Texas A&M played an A+ game. Like, I mean, you couldn't have asked for much better to hold Alabama to those kind of rushing totals, to get pressure on the quarterback, for Edgerrin Cooper to be so good, for Torian York to not be a topic of conversation because he's that good. We don't even have to discuss that they have a true freshman playing linebacker in a game that may decide the SEC West title because he's just been that good. The front seven has been excellent. And then the back 4 or 5 has just not been good, despite the transfers that they brought in, despite historically being pretty good in the secondary the last couple of years. I mean, they led the nation in pass defense last year. How does it get so bad so quick?
Yeah, I do think there's one exception in the secondary, and that's Bryce Anderson. But
yeah, he's been good.
Yeah, I don't understand either. As for like the guys up front not killing each other, I mean, I do have to like remind myself this is not an easy game, especially at this level, and it's tough to execute. Does that make it any less frustrating? No, but yeah, I just, with the pieces that they had back, I mean, obviously you have Damani Richardson, who has, been a part of this A&M secondary for, it seems like, forever. It just feels like they should be so much better than they are. And I understand that the corner position was always going to be the question mark this season, right? There was never really a doubt about that. But it just seems like you should have a little more in the back end that can push you over the top. Because even if the secondary plays like a B- of a game against Alabama, I think the front seven carries it to a win. But with receivers constantly getting behind you and, just giving up long balls throughout the game, you just can't win a game that way. At least not if your offense isn't also able to get those types of plays. And A&M just, there's more explosivity than they had last year, but it's still not where it needs to be to win that type of game.
We mentioned, though, the defensive line has been tremendous. 20 sacks in 3 SEC games. They had 19 sacks total in 12 games last year. So been incredible up front. Edgerrin Cooper is the best defensive player in the state of Texas. Like, full stop. He's been unbelievable. He leads the state in sacks and he plays linebacker. You know what I mean? Like, he's just been unbelievable. Torian York, as we mentioned. But yeah, I mean, you can't get bullied in the secondary that much by a team that's not, an incredible passing team. This wasn't Ole Miss. This wasn't even like Tennessee last year or whatever. Like, Alabama's only passing threat really is chunk it as far down the field as you can. Like, he's not that great of an intermediate passer. He's not going to be like 20 of 24 on you and just precision, right? Like, Alabama's way to win was the vertical passing game if they couldn't run the football. And if a dummy like me knows that, then DJ Jerkin knows that. There just wasn't a thing that they could do to hide DeBerry and to hide some of the weaknesses in that secondary. And that feels like one of those problems. Like, you could probably, like, if you had a really smart offensive line coach, or we were talking to like a former offensive lineman here, I bet there's ways that you can help the offensive line. I don't know if there's ways to help the secondary at this point. It just feels like with those guys and what you have, unless the defensive line doesn't get home, unless Edgerrin Cooper doesn't get home, you're stuck with those secondary players, and a smart OC is going to find the mismatch and exploit it over and over and over again, just like Alabama did with Jermaine Burton.
Yeah, and if A&M doesn't have the front seven they have, it's just going to be even worse. Right. A&M's front seven kept them in this game for sure. I don't think there's any doubt about that, because Alabama, look, I mean, we've already talked about it. They've limited the rushing attack of Alabama. Jalen Milroe, dual threat quarterback, obviously a pretty talented runner, negative 31 yards rushing. I mean, that's just insane. But oh man,
and even sack adjusted, Alabama only averaged 3.3 yards a carry. So, I mean, even if you take away the sack, like they could not do anything on the ground, nothing.
So it's a great performance, and it's just again, I'm gonna sound like a broken record here, but it's a shame that the front seven isn't getting a little more help from the back end.
Road games against Tennessee, Ole Miss, and LSU left. Home schedules looking pretty good. South Carolina, Mississippi State, ACU. I guess before we get into third down, we were kind of 8-4, 9-3 this football team going into the season. Do you feel like 8-4 is still a possibility?
Absolutely. When I look at the schedule, I mean, listen, some of these matchups are going to be very bad for A&M, but I think that a couple of bounces go their way and they can still win just about every game they have left on the schedule. Obviously Tennessee on the road is going to be tough, but I think it's a winnable contest. LSU and Ole Miss, both with the passing attack that they've shown this year, are pretty bad matchups for A&M. But again, I still feel like it's winnable from a standpoint of A&M is going to be the more physical team in both of those games. And then you look at like a Mississippi State, who just by nature of the offense they run is probably going to be a threat to A&M, but they're not as good as they've been in the past. South Carolina, I haven't been impressed with South Carolina at all this year, and hopefully we don't need to talk about Abilene Christian that much.
I don't think we need to talk about Abilene Christian that much. I've seen them play once this year. Not going to do it. But yeah, I think the 3 road games, you wish those were at home because those are the 3 toughest opponents left on the schedule are all on the road. That would be what concerns me. And so, yeah, I mean, I think this team could still be 8-4, 9-3 as well. I mean, they're so good at the front seven defensively. I think they have so many weapons offensively. I think Max Johnson's a fine quarterback. And so if he can have time to throw it into this offensive line, which has been decent, at run blocking, if they, Alabama's a tough team to run the football against, but against the other teams, I think they can be more balanced.
You get a better front seven than Alabama left on the schedule.
Right.
Like, I think that's the most difficult matchup, especially from a pass rushing standpoint with Dallas Turner and Chris Breswell.
Yeah. The secondary is what concerns me moving forward, more so than anything else. Let's go to third down. A&M back on the road on Saturday for a week 7 matchup against Tennessee, a 4-1 Tennessee team. The Vols are a 3.5 favorite for those who don't follow gambling all that much. You tend to get 3 points for being at home. So I think Vegas sees this as mostly a toss-up football game. 2:30 p.m. on CBS. Tennessee enters ranked 19th in the nation. Only loss coming to Florida. They are 4-1. They had a bye last week. Vols been pretty good offensive line-wise, allowing sacks, only 1.2 a game. That's 27th in the nation. I think everybody always assumes that Tennessee with Josh Heupel is a big passing offense, but they run the football, and they run the football really well. They've actually been a lot better on the ground than they have been passing, only averaging 235 yards passing. That's 70th in the nation. For perspective, A&M's 34th. So not a tremendous passing team so far this year, but they are 7th in the nation in rushing. They're averaging 231 yards a game. In that one loss to Florida, what the Gators were able to do, and this is what gives me hope that Texas A&M kind of get back on the horse, get them a win, and kind of rewrite the ship here going forward. Florida physically dominated Tennessee's offensive line up front, stopped the running game, forced Tennessee into being kind of more of a passing team, and they weren't able to do it. The Vols didn't even score 20 points in that loss to Florida. That feels like that has to be A&M's recipe for success here. Stop the running game, make Milton uncomfortable, and just hope that he misses some of those downfield passes that he's capable of making, but he's an inconsistent quarterback, a lot like Jalen Milroe. A better passer, a stronger arm maybe, but is capable of missing those passes and is not very good in the intermediate spot either. He's a vertical passing threat as well.
Yeah, and look, I think A&M does have the ability to replicate what Florida did. I think they're probably better up front. And I think they're better offensively as well. Like, I would rather have Max Johnson than Graham Mertz at the quarterback position. Mm-hmm. With that being said, Florida got Tennessee at home. Obviously, the Swamp is a very positive environment. Neyland's going to be a little bit of a different animal with Tennessee being the home team. I do think A&M matches up decently with Tennessee, especially because I think Tennessee would rather run the ball. I don't see Tennessee keeping the same stats that they've had as far as, 200 plus yards rushing and only allowing, like a sack and a half a game. A&M is absolutely going to get after Milton. I don't know that he's seen pressure quite like what A&M can bring. And it just comes down to, are they going to make the plays? If Milton kind of wilts under the pressure, A&M's going to be in great shape. If he's able to deliver some of those long strikes, even in the face of good pressure from the Aggie front seven, A&M's going to be in for a long day. With that being said, I do think defensively, obviously, like you don't have the pass rushers like Anderson and like Braswell and Turner, like we talked about. So maybe A&M's a little bit better off there. Maybe they can establish the run a little bit more, turn this into a little bit of a slower game than what they did against Alabama. But
is that the key offensively to try to figure out a way to be balanced?
I think so. I think that you have to have just kind of a more that way a team can't, pin their ears back like Alabama was able to do. I think a big part of the reason that A&M had success in the first half, really, against Alabama, is because they were more balanced. They had a little bit of both. And obviously the run game wasn't great in the first half, but it was enough, right? Like enough to kind of establish something where you keep the opposing defense honest. This A&M team is just it's not built to come from behind. So if you jump out to an early lead against Tennessee, I think you can have a more balanced approach. And you can't get too conservative, I think, too, is the other point to that. But you want to get out to an early lead because if you let Neyland get into this game, it's going to be a very hostile environment, and you're going to struggle with what the Volunteers can do.
Tennessee coming off an open week, just as a former player, how much of an advantage is that?
I mean, sometimes you get some guys healthier, and that can be a help coming out of a bye week. But I never felt like the bye week was too much of an advantage. I think another thing that I'm looking at too is, obviously Tennessee has Alabama next after A&M. You can't help but wonder if Tennessee looks forward a little bit to that, especially knowing that Alabama's going to want revenge from last year. So I have a feeling that Alabama's going to bring their best when they take on Tennessee. But yeah, I don't feel like the bye week is particularly an advantage. Or maybe that's just me having seen A&M not play well come out of the bye week. For several years, but I've never felt that it was a very clear and present advantage.
If you're Heupel, do you go, hey, we've been a good running team, but this isn't going to be the week that we're going to run the football a lot. Their secondary stinks. Let's throw it 40 times a game. Or with Milton and just the way that this team is set up, do you have to continue to kind of play call the way that your team is based and then just hope that you pop some passing plays or hope the running game? Kind of how do you approach playing against such a dominant front seven? Do you just concede that the running game is not going to work and then go attack the weak spot? Or do you, at least early on, continue to do that just to create a balance offensively?
I think you have to stick with what you do well. And because if Tennessee is able to get anything going in the run game, then it opens up to passing plays even more so. But you can't change everything that you do based off of your opponent. Obviously, Tennessee is probably going to have success with the long ball at certain points during this game. But you don't get that success without setting it up with a run. I say that Alabama just did, but I think it's a little bit of a different scenario. And I would expect that Tennessee looks to try to run the ball early. And it's definitely possible that they get behind and, just start going for the deep ball constantly. But I would expect more of a balanced approach to start, at least.
Maybe this is me playing too many video games, but if my script was 20 plays deep, 15 of them would be pass plays. I would see what that secondary is early, and if I can block those pass rushers early and then adjust off of that.
And, as Tennessee, like as you said, they're only allowing like 1.2 sacks per game is what you said, I think.
Yep.
So why not? Like if you think you can, keep Milton from ending up on the ground, you might as well just go for it. Especially knowing how weak the secondary is. But we'll see on Saturday. At the very least, I'm looking forward to making the trip up there to Knoxville and getting to see that stadium in person.
Yeah, if I'm Heupel, I'm going kind of short passing game to be the run game early to keep the defensive line balanced, take a few vertical shots to see if A&M made any adjustments back that way. Make the defense play east and west and then go north and south on them is how I think I've talked enough on this podcast. I'm a reverse pitcher. I'm from the Greg Maddux school of pitching, where you kind of you use the off speed stuff to set up the fastball rather than the fastball to set up the off speed stuff. And also, I just am a big believer in just like testing the weak spots of a defense early, just to see what adjustments they've made, see if there's any confidence there, to see if you can kind of poke some holes and get some leaks going. If you're A&M, this is true every single week, but it feels like the first quarter is super important. If Tennessee comes out and they move the ball, they have a couple big I think it's just very easy to go like, oh, here we go again. We can't stop the pass and play. This is going to be a long game. It seems like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, after a big loss like that, you need something good to happen early in that next game, or that lack of confidence can continue,
especially on the road.
Yeah.
And college football in general, I think, is such a momentum game. When things start snowballing, it can have a huge impact on your mental state and lead to just more unforced errors and blown coverages and pressures allowed, things of that nature. They all tend to like compound as things start going wrong. So I do think I agree with you. Like A&M needs to get out early, get a quick score, I think, offensively. And then if they get some stops on Tennessee from a defensive standpoint and kind of get the crowd out of it a little bit, all of a sudden A&M is in pretty good shape in this one.
You use the word momentum. Dave Campbell's Texas football managing editor, Greg Tepper, believes that momentum is fake. He doesn't believe in momentum. And I always enjoy every single time a high school coach and former college football player talks about momentum, because it just illustrates how dumb that opinion is.
I mean, I get it. It's hard to quantify momentum. So why would we believe in it? But I do think that there is some forces in the world that we just can't explain, and momentum happens to be one of them.
Anybody who's ever played golf knows what momentum is. You hit a couple shots in a row and you hit a couple more shots good in a row, right? It doesn't mean you're going to hit the next 70 good in a row. Eventually there's a shelf life there. But there is something to be said about seeing some good things happen, and then all of a sudden more good things happen. Basketball players talk about it all the time when the rim gets bigger. It just feels like, especially with the secondary, especially with the defense, like you said, a few stops early, keep them from getting vertical on you, get some sacks, and then all of a sudden you're feeling better about yourself and you can play a little bit looser. It does feel like early on in that game, though, it's going to be like, oh, okay, let's bunker down here and not let them get deep on us, and we'll see how Tennessee goes about figuring that out. Do you have any predictions for this game? Any thoughts about how this one's going to go, or kind of where you sit here as an oracle who basically nailed the Alabama A&M score from week 6? I'm very interested to know how you think this one's going to head.
Yeah. So I think early in the season, we talked about like the big 4 games, A&M Bama, A&M Tennessee, A&M Ole Miss, A&M LSU. And I was kind of split on what it would happen, and kind of wasn't sure how I leaned. I was leaning A&M winning at Tennessee. I still think that way. I still think that this is a matchup where A&M can do well. Though the things have changed a little bit, right? Going into the season, I think we thought the secondary is going to be the strength, and we were going to see if A&M's run defense would step up. Obviously, that's flipped now.
Yes.
We know what the strength of this A&M defense is. I think that this will probably be a higher scoring game than last week. I think A&M jumps out to an early lead, and then Tennessee has success throwing the ball downfield and hit some of those big plays. But I don't think the Tennessee defense is as good as Alabama was and is going to be able to slow down A&M as much. So I'm looking at like a 35-31 A&M victory.
I actually see this game looking a lot like the Tennessee-Florida game. I think A&M is a better version of Florida, who's going to give Tennessee those same problems. I do worry about the secondary, but I think A&M is going to be able to win this one because of how good they are up front in the trenches. And I think that offensive line, they're not going to get exposed as much because Tennessee's not as good at rushing the passer as Alabama is. I think they're going to have more success in the running game, which really helps them as pass blockers. And so give me A&M 30, Tennessee 23. I think it's going to be hard for Tennessee to do, because this isn't last year's Tennessee football team. They are not capable of putting up 50 points on you by throwing the ball 60 times a game with the electric wide receivers. They have struggled passing the ball. I think A&M will give them more yards than maybe Tennessee is used to. I don't think they're going to hold them to 235 yards passing through the air, but I think they're going to eliminate Tennessee's ability to run the football, put Tennessee in a bunch of 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s, and that defensive line is going to go eat and take advantage of that. So I think A&M gets back on the horse here, wins this football game by, within one score. I think it's going to be a good football game. But to me, it's all about the start, like we talked about. Getting that crowd out of it, getting that confidence back in the team, shaking off some of those negative vibes from a close loss that you feel. I'd imagine everybody in that locker room feels like they should have won that football game. And so to shake that out early, to get a lead, get some good momentum feeling there, I think that's going to be a big part. And then also you can't lose the turnover battle. If either defense can come up with a way to get 1 or 2 free possessions from the offense, that's going to be the difference to me. And so should be another close game, more small margins. You just hope that maybe Jimbo gets a little bit more aggressive on the road with a little bit less to lose without so much spotlight on the teams this week. So anything else to say about that game? You want to move on to 4th down?
Yeah, I mean, and another thing, obviously you never want injuries, but Tennessee being down one of their better receivers in Brew McCoy could play a role as well. And Tennessee's ability to attack the A&M secondary. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Again, part of me is just like, be excited to be at that game and see Neyland in person, and don't worry about the outcome of the game just so I don't get invested. But no, it should be a good matchup, and I do think A&M has a good chance at winning this one.
Knoxville's an underrated city. Great weather, close to the Smoky Mountains. Stadium's beautiful. I've never been to a game there, but I've been to the stadium to walk around. Kind of a stadium junkie. If I'm driving through cities to go somewhere else, or if I like this summer, I went to the Smoky Mountains. And so when we came back through Knoxville, I made my fiance, who has never seen a live football game in her life, despite going to Kerrville, Tybee, and to Texas Tech during really two really good runs for both teams. Just never been to a football game. I made her walk around the stadium, and she didn't care. It was just a big stadium to her.
Yeah,
but I thought it was
by
really
it
cool.
on the way up to Richmond when I drove up that way. Yeah. So really excited to see how it looks on a game day.
Yeah, I bet it's pretty
area.
awesome.
I mean, with the
beautiful
river
area.
There.
Yeah, beautiful area. I'm a sucker for the whole like take your boat to the game thing. Not that I have a boat, but I just think it looks really cool. Like I think Baylor Stadium's the most underrated one in the state because of the Brazos River running right behind it and stuff like that. So jealous of you. I think that's probably a top 5 venue in college football. And already this year through week 7, you will have been to at Penn State, Kyle Field, and now at Tennessee. I think you're making the rounds there. So that's good. As somebody else on a journey through stadium atmospheres and stuff this year, I think you may have me beat being able to lead the state.
Definitely got lucky with my schedule so far.
Yeah, it's been a good schedule. All right, let's move to more fun topics. I feel like that was a very down 45 minutes of podcasting about A&M. A&M still 4-2. I mean, honestly, Alabama looks like a team that's going to lose at least one conference game, maybe even 2. So plenty to play for if you're Texas A&M. If you can go 9-3 or 10-2, this is a fantastic year. And as you mentioned, every game left is winnable. Will they win every single one of them? Probably not. Just odds-wise and how these things go. But there's not a game left on the schedule where you're like, A&M's got no chance there, right? And so I think that's the good news for not only the team, but the fan base. Again, you get to 9-3, 10-2, go to a good bowl game. That's a good year considering you lost your quarterback, the offensive line is struggling, and the secondary is what it is. And so to me, that feels like a success if they can get there. We'll see if they can, because they have some really tough road games left to go. Let's have some fun in 4th down in the Ask Jay segment of the show. We're going to start off with my guy, Jamie Plunkett. Really good TCU writer. Follow everything that he does there. He does the TCU podcast here on the Republic of Football. He asked, if you could only eat one food for the rest of your life and it had to be from the state fair, what would it be?
Oh, man. Well, I'm probably not going to live that long because none of the food at the fair is healthy. This is probably going to be a vanilla answer, but I'd probably go with the corn dog.
Of course. That's
and here's the thing. Nobody said what kind of condiments I can put on it. So I might get a little bit wild with some of the things that I put on the corn dog as my meal, right? Maybe go a little like queso on occasion to mix it up. I would get creative with it, but it's the Fletcher's corn dog for sure.
Yeah, you need something that you can eat multiple times a day. You need something with some protein, right? Because like on the surface, I would say like a fried Snickers is probably my favorite thing at the fair, just in terms of just bite for bite. It's hard to beat the fried Snickers, fried Oreos, something sweet. I'm of the belief, this is a pro tip for people going to the state fair, eat the sweet stuff early, because that meaty kind of heavy stuff can really make you maybe have to go to the bathroom. And then the Cotton Bowl, those facilities are awful. So hang on with the sweet stuff early on, and then save it, before you're going to leave to go with like the fried brisket sandwiches and the different stuff that they have there. But it feels like it has to be the corn dog. It's the most tolerable. You can eat it multiple times. It gives you some protein. You can eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Believe me, I've eaten a corn dog at the state fair at 8 a.m. before. And so it can be a breakfast food. As you mentioned, you can put queso on it. You can go ketchup sometimes, even though I think that's blasphemous. If you had to eat it every single day, you could occasionally go ketchup on it. All the different types of mustards. You can make it 18 different meals if you go a different mustard every single time.
So that does feel. It up, put it on a salad. Why not?
Yeah, I don't know if that's allowed. I didn't know
use
if you
the
were
cornbread
to
make it into like croutons, and then like you have the hot dog as the meat. I mean, it wasn't excluded explicitly. Yeah. So again,
we have had a few of these
with it.
We have had a few of these questions where I have pinned myself into the question too much, where you have allowed yourself freedom. And I think it just illustrates how literal I am. I have a very hard time with figurative stuff, with like trying to get out of the box. I am super literal. There may be a test I need to take to tell me how my brain works, but I have a hard time thinking outside of the box with questions. And so I hemmed myself in to only being able to eat this one singular item for the rest of my life.
And the problem with thinking outside of the box too is sometimes I give myself too many options, and then it's paralysis by analysis.
100%.
So there's pros and cons to both. That's why we work so well together, I think.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, it just feels like the corny dog has to be a part of it. When's the last time you were at the fair?
Man, it's been a long time. It was probably pre-COVID for me.
Mm. Yeah, some of the things that they put out there, you're just like, who came up with this? And this has to be a shtick. Like, this isn't
like the fried fireball shot.
Right. Like, what is that? Absolutely not. They had like fried Vietnamese coffee that my friend Danny Davis at the Statesman tried, and he was like, it wasn't that bad. It's like, what was it? Was it that good? Like, what are we doing here?
Like, would I do it again? If not,
no. It's just a bit, really. A lot of those foods are just a bit. This is vanilla, but every time I go, I eat a couple corn dogs on the way in, a fried Snickers on the way out. Keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid. That's how I try to do it. From K Mays on Twitter. You're hosting an away game watch party at your house. What does the food and drink spread look like?
Okay, so I look at this and I'm like, I like to theme my food when I can. So like depending on the opponent, like if I was playing, let's say it's South Carolina, on the road at South Carolina, I'm gonna do like some fried chicken, because obviously South Carolina, the Gamecocks. Like if we have a game against Florida on the road, I would probably do some kind of fried gator. LSU is obviously like Cajun food, so I'm going to go that route. But let's say that, for example, in this hypothetical scenario, I can't make it to Austin the first time that A&M plays at Texas. I'm obviously going to go with a barbecue feast. But you got to
Austin's the capital of barbecue.
Because Austin's capital of barbecue, and also because Bevo.
I just wanted to get you on record saying Austin was the capital of barbecue.
It is.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't think anybody can defeat. Like,
they'll try.
You can say that historically Lockhart, but I just don't think that there's a better barbecue town than Austin.
That's correct.
But
so if anybody from Kansas City gets in my mentions, you're blocked.
Kansas City to North Carolina or Memphis, any of those places.
Mm-hmm.
You're great, but we're just better.
Right.
But yeah, I'm gonna have like for an appetizer, maybe some like barbecue, smoke sessions in Royce City does brisket jalapeno popper egg rolls. So I'll put some of those on as an appetizer. Maybe some queso, right? Some some brisket queso to get going. Obviously, you're going to have the Texas Trinity. You're going to have your brisket, your ribs, your sausage. As a dessert, there are plenty of options in the world of barbecue for dessert, but I think the number one go-to, banana pudding.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta have banana pudding in that spread. For drinks, I mean, you're gonna have your classic barbecue refreshments. Some of that's gonna be beer, but you're also gonna have Big Red because Big Red goes with barbecue really well. Topo Chico, I like a good Topo Chico with barbecue, and that's gonna be my spread. Sides, obviously, gotta have good sides. I think I'm gonna go with like a green bean casserole, like Bar A Barbecue does, which is one of my favorite. Truth Barbecue here in Houston, they do a tater tot casserole that I really like. Probably gonna have that as an option. You have to have some kind of fresh like side, that way you're not just overloading on carbs and meat. Leroy and Lewis in Austin does a kale Caesar salad that I really like, is like a more refreshing option. And then I'll also probably do like a tomato cucumber salad. So you get 2 of the heavies and then 2 of the lights to really get the other thing too is like you can do those salads in bulk. So it's kind of easy. That's the other thing you have to think of here is if you're hosting a watch party, you're going to have to feed a lot of people. And those are kind of easier to go with as far as bulk options go.
I'm going to keep it simple. Nobody asked me, but I like to give my answers anyway in the Ask Jay segment. If I'm hosting something, I hosted the Super Bowl in January or February, whenever that was, at my house when I got to move back to Austin, which was really nice. That was like a great moment for me. I got my brother over there, had a couple of friends. It was like, yes, I am officially back in Austin after my 1-year bid up in DFW. I'm easy though, because I don't like to cook and I don't like to spend a lot of money. I just do pizza, chicken wings, Dr. Pepper, beer. Right. That feels, get a dip of some kind, like a buffalo chicken ranch kind of dip for some chips or whatever like that to snack on, because the pizza and the chicken wings serves as appetizers, meal, sides. Like they can do whatever. You can eat them 3 hours after you first got them. They work perfectly. It feels like crowd pleasers as well. Sometimes people come over and maybe they don't like a bunch of barbecue, or they don't want, whatever that they don't want. I get my fiance is a vegetarian, so some of this answer is because of that. But pizza just feels like a crowd pleaser that lasts for a long time, and you can eat it at the beginning of the game, at halftime, at the end of the game, and feel fine about it.
Yeah, that does bring up another good point. Is you actually kind of stopped by our tailgate for a little bit. My buddy Nick was kind of chefing up the quesadillas, and those were
delicious, man.
Pretty good.
Really good.
So
you were right about the press box food not being as good. I had chicken strips and a salad up top.
I'm glad we got you a little snack there. I mean, dude, he like prepped the meat ahead of time and then had it ready to go so that we could make those quesadillas. And we were kind of making fun of him for like the amount of work he put into it, but it turned out pretty good. So shout out to Nick for that.
I added a question here based on being at your tailgate for a little while. There was an Australian gentleman there, which had me in stitches. That guy was hilarious. Josh is
an incredible human being, and
yeah,
he let me know afterwards that A&M was the best game day atmosphere of any sport that he's ever been to. So,
well, that was what I wanted to ask you. He seemed to have a great time. You told me he played rugby. He's a rugby guy from Australia, so obviously college football kind of a new thing to him. This was his first time ever being on a college football game. You spoiled him because like now how can he go to another one? He's going to compare it to that one the rest of the time, and it's not going to be the same. I wanted to ask you, if it was flipped and you were going to another country to experience a first time sporting event, what would you want it to be? Where do you want to go? What do you want to see?
Mike, I have a feeling that we have the same answer on this. I would go to Premier League. Yeah, I would 100% go, and me being a Tottenham guy, I would go to North London, watch Tottenham play. If I have my ideal event, it's the North London Derby at Tottenham.
Sure. Against Arsenal.
I think it's a no-brainer. There's a few other events that I would like to go to, but that's definitely the top of my list. I would say I want to go to that like sport in Italy that's like half ball sport, half mixed martial arts, where they just kind of like fight each other in the street. It's Calcio something. I don't know exactly what it is. I'm sure somebody will correct us, but that is a number 2 as far as event I would love to go to internationally.
Yeah, I wrote down. I'd love to go see an English Premier League game. For me, the ideal one would be Manchester United at Liverpool. Would be my ideal situation there to see an EPL game. I also need to go see Fulham if I only get to London because they play at Craven Cottage. I'd imagine there's some kind of relation there going back, however many centuries back or whatever. So I'd love to go see a game at Craven Cottage. The other ones I wrote down, I think you'll appreciate this. I'd love to go see a cricket game in India.
Yeah.
Those people freaking love cricket. And that, I guess to me, that seemed more in line of like, I don't really know what's going on here. And I can just immerse myself in this experience that I don't know a ton about. I think that would be really cool. And then the last one I wrote down is an MMA match in Brazil. Going to like a big UFC fight or even like a jiu-jitsu tournament in Brazil would be different than it is going to one in Vegas or in Houston, which are my other two experiences doing that.
Yeah. One of my favorite all-time sporting moments is Jose Aldo knocking out Chad Mendez. And then it's in Brazil and he sprints into the crowd and they just like carry him on their shoulders back to the cage. And it's just an incredible moment. The Brazilian MMA fans are insane. And it would be a lot of fun to watch a fight there.
I'd love to go see a soccer game in Argentina as well, like against like the Boca Juniors or something like that. But I don't know if I'd be safe. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of part of it as well when it comes to some of these deals is like you see some of those stories. Like I have an uncle who's married to a woman from El Salvador, and she actually came over here because of the El Salvador Honduras war, like, 30, 40 years ago. However, I'm not a historian, however long ago that was. That shit started over a soccer game. Like that whole thing like kicked off over a soccer game. Some of her stories of going to soccer games early in her life and what she saw is just like, what are we talking about here? Like machetes are involved. Like this is insane. Yeah. And so I would love to go see a South American soccer, like Argentina versus Brazil and like Copa America or something like that would be tremendous. But then you got to worry about getting out of there alive when you have the skin color that I have.
The trick is to just find the home fans and stick with them and stay deep embedded so that you don't get close to the visitors and the action that happens.
100%. Maybe a sign that says like, I'm with the good guys or whatever you need to do.
I mean, to be fair, it's not any more dangerous than like a Los Angeles Dodgers, San Francisco Giants game, right?
Well, I would never go to one of the, I honestly, maybe this is like, I'm starting to get old manny here, but like, I don't think I'd go to an NFL game again. Have you seen all the fights that are happening at NFL? Like, I don't need to go to jail. And I definitely don't need to go to the hospital. Yeah. And those seem like to be the only two options really, if you're going to an NFL game these days.
Unless you're sitting up in the suite with Taylor Swift, right?
Right.
Then I might go.
Yeah, I'd go to a press box, but I don't know. I definitely, there's some stadiums where I don't have the temperament to walk away. So I'm either going to get my ass kicked or I'm going to go to jail for kicking somebody's ass. I don't know which one's more likely, but something's going to happen, and it's not going to be fun for me or my pocketbook.
No, either way, you lose.
Yeah, either way, you're losing. So, all righty, Jay. When are you? What's the plan for are you driving to Knoxville?
So, actually, the whole Arnold clan's making a trip. So
nice.
After Thursday night work, I'm going to drive up to DFW to my folks in Rockwall, and then we'll leave from Rockwall on Friday morning, drive to Knoxville. We got a hotel about 20 minutes from the stadium, which, I mean, you'd love to be closer, but honestly, you're just happy to get there on a big game day weekend. And then we'll drive back Sunday morning. So it'll be a whirlwind trip, but I'm excited to see Knoxville.
I am 38 years old, going in on 39 in about 6 months. My dad still doesn't let me drive anywhere. We went to Yellowstone like 3 years ago, and I figured now that I'm over 35 years old at that moment, I would drive some. He drove the whole way. We landed in Salt Lake City. We went to Grand Tetons. We went up to Yellowstone. We ended up leaving from Bozeman. I didn't sit in the driver's seat one time. How does your dad kind of handle road tripping with Jay?
Yeah, if we're together, he is exclusively the driver. He does not let me drive anywhere, which I get. But I'm gonna be kind of thankful for this one because I have a feeling that Tennessee's gonna get the better of me at some point. So I'm not gonna complain about it too much.
Yeah, Unfortunately, my dad will drive even if he's partaking, if he has partaken. He's a country dude from Bertram, Texas, or whatever. Some of those laws, I don't think he thinks matters to him, and so I've just gotten used to it over the years. But I thought it was funny because I'm the same way. I don't let anybody else drive with me. Like Dave Wilson and I from ESPN drove all the way to the Fiesta Bowl last year because of the Southwest connection stuff around Christmas or whatever. And I drove the whole way there too, because like I'm the same way where I don't like sitting in the driver or in the passenger seat. I think it's a control thing. But yeah, you'll be able to sleep halfway home, hopefully, if Tennessee goes the way you think it's going to go.
That's the plan. The hard part's going to be once we get back to Rockwall, and then I have to drive 4 hours back to Houston. Hopefully I will be rested up enough because I got to make sure that my fiance gets to work on time on Monday.
There you go. That is the important part. That is the important part. All right, Jay. Tough week last week against Alabama in that 26-20 loss. I think we covered it pretty well there, pretty fairly as well. I think, obviously you talked about the bad. Tennessee coming up though, a chance to kind of right those wrongs and get back into the win column, kind of rewrite this season. That still a ton to play for, right?
Yeah, you have a chance at a ranked top 25 away win.
Yeah.
That could still be huge for this program.
No doubt. And with the way that Alabama's looked vulnerable and the way the SEC looks, who knows how this goes, right, moving forward. And so if you're A&M, you just got to keep winning, get to that 9 or 10 win season rank. And then, I feel like it's not the perfect year, but a successful year. So a lot still to play for, a lot to be excited about. The sky isn't completely falling as of now. We'll check in next week. Maybe by the time we record next week, it'll be a little bit different tenure. But if A&M comes about and beats Tennessee on the road, I feel like this season is still on track.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think we went into the season thinking that the Alabama game was going to be a loss. Obviously, hopes were raised at some point. But you still have a lot to play for. And like you said, Alabama could easily end up with 2 conference losses. All of a sudden, A&M runs the table and they find themselves in Atlanta. So
no doubt,
definitely a lot to play for.
Yes, sir. All right, we will be back next week for Jay Arnold from Mike Craven, Republic of Football, and Dave Campbell's Texas Football. Please rate, subscribe, tell a friend, all of that good stuff, and we will talk to you next week.